Hello students, let's explore topic 5, intellectual property protection, 5.2.3 from Edexcel GCSE computer science. The main ones to consider are registered and copyright. Let's put them here. I'll put trademarks here. And also patents. So you might have patented stamp somewhere. You'll have encountered registered trademarks and copyright quite often, I'd imagine. So this would be typically things like logos. You know, if you've got a little trademark there, you might have well-known brands like Kellogg's, Marmite, they're all trademarked. The Android symbol is also trademarked, Facebook name, and even little jingles like Intel inside, dun, 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 dun. That's going to be protected with a registered trademark. So you can also, there can be a license agreement. To use trademarks. So you can apply for a license to use a trademark somewhere else. But a company like Kellogg's or whoever owns them, whatever big subsidiary it is, Unilever or Kraft, someone like that, they will own the trademark for particular logos. And even colours like JCB yellow is protected. Okay, so that's covering registered trademarks. Copyright. Now this is automatically granted. Okay, that's the key thing we need to remember here. It's automatically granted. And by the way, all of these stem under this idea of IP, intellectual property. Okay, it's super important that IP is protected, because otherwise companies can just use other people's inventions essentially, or property without the consent, and it's to gain unlawful or market leverage. And companies do, even big companies like Apple do this. They've got in trouble before, and in fact there are lots and lots of different companies whose patents are being used in things like iPhones. There might be a Sony CMOS sensor for the camera. There might be they might have to pay Samsung some money for certain usage of stylus pens or something, whatever. So there could be all sorts of patents that need to be applied for a company's product. Copyright, so it's automatically granted on original things like we'll say music and software. So if you code a piece of software, it's automatically granted copyright. You can get permission to use from copyright holder. Okay, you can apply for permission. So for example, if you're in a bedroom making a song, because you made that song, you are granted copyright. Now, whether that's legally withstanding, you have to be careful and sometimes speak to lawyers to say, I did make this on this date and it is mine, because just saying, oh, I did it, isn't always good. It's not always held up in court, but you are protected. There is an automatically, if you make that piece of music, you are automatically protected for it. And of course, if someone wants to make a cover song, they can apply for permission to use your copyrighted material. Now, a patent might include, if you've got a smartphone and you've got the cameras in the back, maybe, as I said before, Sony might have the patent for the CMOS sensor, but it's an iPhone. Okay, so Apple would have to give Sony a proportion of its, the royalties from this phone, or pay them with a certain license agreement to use their technology. Maybe because Sony made it in the first place, and they won't allow Apple to use it without acknowledgement. This is just a made-up example, but there are things like this exist. It could even be proprietary port. So Apple make a Lightning connector. If other companies wanted to make a Lightning connector for their products, because lots of people have charging cables for it, they would need to talk to Apple because Apple owned the patent for it. Now, you have 20 years for a patent until it expires. Expires in 20 years. Okay, so that's important to remember. Let's have a look at some exam style questions that might pertain to these ideas. So IP is protected by different methods. Complete the table with the method of protection for each type. Okay, so a hardware invention. So this will be a patent. An advertising slogan. This is where we have our trademark, and also copyright could give you the mark here as well. Okay, so advertising slogan is more likely to be trademarked. So, but either of those would give you a mark. Explain one way a patent protects intellectual property. It a patent. So it is an explain command word. A patent prevents someone or a company copying or using an invention. Dyson vacuum cleaners, for example, they may have the patent on their bagless technology now, and other companies would have to have a license agreement put in place with Dyson to use that technology, and Dyson would be protected for about 20 years. If they've come up with something new that no one else has done, and they can say that part of their technology is new and as an invention, then they can claim hold to that. What else could you say? Anyone that infringes can be prosecuted. Now, where this gets a bit murky is there are lots of technology companies that just buy patents. That's all they do. They don't make anything themselves. They just buy up other people's inventions, and then they say, "Hey, Apple, we own the patent for this. You need to pay us some money every time you make a new iPhone." And they constantly end up in litigation or courts. All sorts of things just drag through the court system because there's so much money at stake. But yeah, there are lots of companies that all they do is just buy up intellectual property, which is, I don't know, but that's the world we live in. State 2 methods of protecting intellectual property. Well, we talked about them. This is where you can just put patents, copyright, trademarks, licensing, and NDAs also cover this. Non-disclosure agreements. So if you're working for a company, they might ask you to sign an NDA, so you're not to disclose the technology that we're working on right now, because it could be sensitive for the marketplace, cause stock prices to go up or down, and they're not ready for that. So you might be, NDAs might protect intellectual property. So yeah, Apple are working on the next Apple car, right? But you can't talk about it. Okay, so yeah, it's definitely a prickly issue. But the main takeaways from this are copyright's automatically granted. You have to register a trademark, you have to apply for it, and a patent gives you 20 years of protection for a technology or an innovation, hardware essentially.